Welcome to HSDF the Podcast, a collection of policy discussions on government technology and homeland security brought to you by the Homeland Security and Defense Forum. In this first of a two-part series, Patrick Walsh, Chief of Contracting Office at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Nick Martinelli, Director of the Information Technology Contracting Division at Customs and Border Protection, and Bill Weinberg, Assistant Administrator for Contracting and Procurement at Transportation Security Administration, discuss the speed of acquisition around emerging technologies and efforts to support artificial intelligence initiatives. Featuring Patrick Walsh, Chief of Contracting Office, Information Technology Division, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Nick Martinelli, Director of the Information Technology Contracting Division, Office of Acquisition, Customs and Border Protection, Bill Weinberg, Assistant Administrator for Contracting and Procurement and Head of Contracting Activity, Transportation Security Administration, Jonathan Album, Federal Chief Technology Officer, ServiceNow. This discussion took place at the HSDF Technology Innovation in Government Symposium on February 22, 2024.
I think we're going to have a great conversation. Super important topic to everybody in this room, procurement. And how do we go about buying innovative technologies and service to implement those technologies? And to help us through this conversation, we have a great panel of experts. And as we get into what they're focused on, some of their bios, I just want to briefly introduce myself. I'm Jonathan Albom. I'm the Federal CTO for ServiceNow. But before I worked at ServiceNow, I worked in the federal government for a long time, primarily at the Department of Agriculture and as a Chief Information Officer at different agencies within USDA and then at the department itself. And I also had the opportunity during my federal career to serve for a period of time as a Deputy Senior Procurement Executive at USDA. So I saw this procurement and IT collaboration from both sides. And I can tell you that, in the technology space, in the CIO world, if you don't have a strong procurement team, if you can't get contracts out and you can't get good vendors and hardware and software in, you're not going to be very successful. And it takes a strong collaboration. So that's going to be one of the things we talk about today. And, we want this to be a very interactive conversation. So if you have questions along the way, raise your hand, let us know, and we'll integrate those into our conversation. So I want to get started though by having our panel tell us a little about themselves. And Patrick, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I think it's really cool that you have a bunch of contracting professionals up here. I do think that there is a lot of importance of bringing the 1102 perspective on the IT space. I'm the Chief of Contracting Office at the IT Division for U.S. ICE. Previously, I held warrants at the Air Force and the Navy, been at ICE since 2020. And I think sharing a little bit about my portfolio will kind of also share a little bit about my take on contracting. I have 4 different sections, and one of my sections is focused on HSI. Each of my sections is very customer-oriented. So HSI, and one of our big contracts with HSI that's coming up for a recompete is called Investigative Case Management. One of the things that we're doing on that contract that I think is an important point for me is that we are having an industry day. So early, often communication with industry is really something we foot stomp and make sure happens, whether through RFIs, draft RFPs, or industry days. And then another one of my sections is the solutions delivery. That's where we had a huge $340 million IDIQ that we awarded a couple years ago called SWIFT. The reason I bring that up is, first of all, SWIFT 2.0 is coming around the corner before we know it. But also, SWIFT was a way that we were able to incorporate some efficiencies into a contract so that down the road, when my customer, the OCIO, needs something done, we can go a lot quicker and we can get a quick turnaround. So at the end of the last fiscal year, we had 8 task orders that we got the requirement within 1 month to award. So Swift is one of our really quick turn vehicles. Another section I have is called operations. Operations is where we have our big cloud contract. We also have a new requirement for video teleconferencing. And what we're going to try and do with video teleconferencing, I think, is going to really shorten, again, the timeline from requirement to award by having, first of all, having a BPA, so having one vendor, having that competition up front, and then being able to award rather than having less than SAT buys that are competed in. I have to have my contracting officer do a justification for award each time around. So it'll be a lot more streamlined in video teleconferencing. And then the fourth section is ERO. So for those, I'm sure most of the room is familiar with ICE's structure, enforcement removals operations. Enforcement removals has an ERO O&M contract that is really doing a lot of the O&M of the major apps and the major applications for ERO. One way that we've tried to incorporate this speed and efficiency into that contract is by pivoting after award. So having the flexibility after award to say, hey, we want to focus on this notice to appear micro app, which was really important to getting people processed across the border a lot quicker. So we pivoted the contract to being performance-based, focusing on getting the deliverable of that micro app into the hands of our law enforcement officers a lot quicker. And by making it performance-based, incentivize the contractor to also make that deliverable more quickly.
So just a lot of great information, Rob. We've corrected the slow start with a fast start. So, Nick, why don't you share a little of your background and a couple of things you're working on?
Sure. So I'd like to thank HSDF for having CBP here today. It's great to be here. My name is Nick Martinelli. I'm the Division Director for the Information Technology Contracting Division at CBP. I have 3 branches that work under me, and we are supporting the Office of Information and Technology as well as our law enforcement partners. The OIT has 2 big groups, the enterprise infrastructure as well as the application side of the house. I've been with CBP since 2009 and supported CBP in a number of various management capacity as well as contracting. Looking forward to the conversation here today, and we'll talk about some of the contracts during the Q&A.
Excellent. Bill.
What?
If you want.
I'm sorry. What do it?
We've had some time in the green room.
Yeah.
But, he's the reason we were late. But
Yes.
if you want, share a little about your experience and what.
Sure. Like Nick, thank you for inviting me. And I spent 22 years at the Department of the Navy. I moved over to ICE in 2007, and I want to thank Ashley Lewis, who took a big chance and hired me at ICE in 2007. And Luke McCormick is around here somewhere. He's the person who first told me, you should apply for these senior executive positions. I could see you doing that. So I did it. I ended up doing that. I worked at ICE for almost 10 years, with a little break at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, where I got selected to the senior executive service, came back to ICE as the head of contracting, retired, worked for a company called Guidepost Solutions, Julie Meyer's company. She used to be the assistant secretary for ICE. They hired me to be a federal acquisitions consultant. I did that for a while. I came back to federal service in 2020. Some of you may remember there was some sort of health thing going on in 2020, and business development and events like this were not happening. So I went back to federal service. I've been at TSA since November of 2020. I've got both of my COVID boosters on-prem there. So I passed 3 years there now, and I'm happy to be here. I'm the head of contracting at TSA now. So everything
Bill,
they do plus
I want to ask you the first question.
Okay.
We know there's a lot of ways to solve technology problems, a lot of technologies, a lot of different providers. Choices we can make. We can, buy something. We can build something. I'd like to start with you and ask you, how have you approached those kinds of conversations with the IT organizations you work with? How does that happen at TSA today? How do you have that interaction so you get the right technology, the right service for the problem we're solving?
I think that the biggest thing that we can do is obviously have a great working relationship with the CIO and their organization to really define what it is they want. And then doing market research and partnering with industry to see what's out there. You know, a lot of times in the past and even today, the government thinks they know exactly what they want. Here's a statement of work, go put that out and get people to bid on that. As opposed to saying, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and can you tell us what you have that might solve that problem? And that's where we get to leverage what industry is doing out there. And usually industry is doing a lot more innovative things than we know about. So having a CIO and a CTO, technology officer, that are aware of what's going on. You know, there's a ton of IT companies out there. A lot of them are here today, I think. And there's a lot of good solutions out there, a lot of good products, a lot of good solutions to problems. I read something recently that says stop defining requirements and start defining problems. That's what we're trying to get to do. An RFP is really like a cry for help, if you think of it, and people have heard me say that before. So really partnering with them to find out what they want and solicit that, as opposed to just soliciting what you solicited 5 years ago and hoping that somebody will provide some innovation. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Nick. I'm curious what that looks like at CBP.
Sure. I would echo a lot of the same things that Bill had said. I think that where CBP wants to move is, and where I think I'd like the team to move is, you know, not only are we talking with our CIO and our deputy CIOs, but then also speaking directly with some of the business owners or the law enforcement partners that we have, and sit with them as well to hear what they have to say about what they're using in the field and what they're encountering every single day. And then when it comes to the contracting piece of it, you know, doing some of the things like a draft RFP, but then also starting before that and sort of doing draft things in increments. So if we do have requirements or a cry for help or need, let's get the requirements out there to industry early as possible, so that they can give us feedback on what works, what could possibly be a better solution, and then sort of take that next incremental step to say, okay, you know, you've seen what the requirements look like, so here's how we're going to evaluate folks in the RFP process.
That's great. That dialogue becomes a real critical element to getting a good result, right? And you know, I'm just curious to add on to that. What kind of response do you typically get when you put something out, to a draft RFP out to industry? Are you getting lots of responses? Are you getting valuable responses? Are there ways that folks in this room can respond that are more helpful or less so?
Yes, I think that so we always get a ton of response, which is, you know, it's great to get feedback from industry, both the positive and the negative, when they see issues with what we're doing, or with the, hey, you're headed in the right direction, and ultimately the solutions that they're bringing to the table. We've talked about, and some of the folks that are here in this room I've spoken with and said, hey, you know, tell us what you know what our requirements are, what's in the future. If you want to share a white paper with us, we're happy to engage with you. We'll review the white paper and we'll share that with our OIT leadership. So we always get a ton of response, and we try to be responsive to the people that have responded when we're doing market research, as well as when we're doing the responses to a draft PWS or a draft RFP. We want to do business that is going to get us the best technical solution. So we try to answer every question that we possibly can.
So we want those kinds of conversations ongoing. You know, proactive is very good too. Don't always wait, you know, for that RFP to come out. There's information that can come from the innovations Bill was describing, right, into the government. I experienced that firsthand as a seat myself. So, Patrick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there, but I do want to get your take on things you're doing to make procurement more effective and efficient, go faster? I think everybody here would say these things take too long. Some of it's the back and forth, perhaps, but the government wants to get it right. How do we speed it up?
Yeah, I do want to put a disclaimer out there because I know that is the general consensus that government takes too long to buy stuff. When we're doing an O&M services contract, which I'm sure a lot of contractors in this room perform, so long as we give ourselves enough runway, there's no sense in getting it done way in advance. We need adequate transition time. There are holdups with things like security processing, so we need to make sure we get our people on board with adequate transition time. However, I don't need to go out and procure a services O&M contract for 2 years from now. There's no sense in really doing that 2 years ahead of time. Also, let's be honest, this system wasn't exactly created 100% for speed. There's a lot of legislation behind sort of the requirements that me and my contracting officers have to checkmark before we are able to award something. Whether or not speed is more important than those other interests, the legislation has decided that those other interests trump speed a lot of the time. So, things like protestability, vendor-to-vendor contracting, protest is not something that's possible. However, when I'm awarding a contract, I have to ensure that this isn't something that, as much as I can, isn't going to be protested. Mm-hmm. So that there's a lot of other considerations.
Operationally in your office, though, you shared with me some of the things that you're doing just to run a better office.
Absolutely.
And make those interactions better. Why don't you share that with everyone?
Yeah, so within the parameters of that space, we do try and go as fast as possible. So I mentioned Swift up front. When we created Swift as an IDIQ, we saw it as an opportunity to really speed up that timeline to award. We've gone from 6 months when we had to post out on a strategic sourcing vehicle to 1 to 2 months. I mentioned the 7 to 8 task orders up front that we got done in 1 month. Now, this is complicated stuff. Hyper automation, platform as a service, various different things that we were able to evaluate and get on contract very quickly because we did the framework up front. We did the heavy lifting. We did the FAR 15 and exposed ourselves to potential protests, but because we were able to get through it, now we're able to do things a lot quicker. We can waive acquisition plans, for example, that otherwise would have gone up to potentially to DHS. I would have to go for approval for some of these task orders, but we don't need to create that extra paperwork. Some of the things are what are called pill techniques that we've been doing for a long time. We do oral presentations. We do two-phase down selects. So during our second phase or second look, we're typically looking at 3 or 4 offerers rather than everybody who was interested. They're advisory, so people can go through the extra legwork of doing a full proposal if they want to, but that does narrow the playing field. And then building in flexibility post-award. So one thing I mentioned up front was one of our contracts that had to pivot, the ERO O&M contract that we had to do an NTA micro app that hadn't been envisioned at the time of award. So building in that flexibility when you know you need to. Not everything can be a performance-based contract. You don't know up front, necessarily, I want to build a rocket, for example, which is a very tangible thing that you could put as a performance-based contract. A lot of times, we don't know exactly where this thing's going to land 3, 4, 8 months down the road. So building in flexibility by having CLINs that are created to have either a personnel focus or a focus on surge. So we use surge CLINs for T&M. And we've also done not only options at the end of the year, but options within the year. So say HSI comes upon some money and they had this idea up front, then they're able to exercise that CLIN like that and get surge work done a lot more efficiently.
The flexibility is we want to all embrace that.
Thank you for tuning in. You can follow HSDF the podcast on any major podcast platform. Visit hsdf.org to learn more about the Homeland Security and Defense Forum.